Hello, welcome to Bored and Confused, where I review shows based on two criteria. One, was I bored? Two, was I confused? Today is a special edition. It is a live review of Queen of Versailles, which I just saw moments ago. I went to opening night. It was supposed to start at 6. It always starts late. We started like 6:25, and then afterwards, the producer and Kristin and Michael Arden, the director, all spoke about how happy they were and how thankful they were for the cast and all the people who worked to put a new musical on Broadway. So this is a big musical. It's a big cast, big sets. I mean, it's Versailles, right? Everything's supersized in this show. I haven't had a chance to really process this other than the 5-minute racing back to get here. Going into this, I didn't know anything about it other than the fact that Kristin Chenoweth is in it, and that was, and I knew that Stephen Schwartz was writing the score, and I might have known that Michael Arden was directing, but it slipped from my mind. And so I really didn't know anything about it. This show is based on a documentary about Jackie Siegel and her husband David and their 11 dogs and their 7 kids, although only one dog is present in this show, and one kid and one cousin. The rest of the kids are conveniently off stage for the rest of the show. So it really just has a small cast of principals in this. You've got her parents, Jackie's parents, you've got Dave and his son, and then you've got Jackie's daughter and Jackie's niece, who comes in almost at the end of Act 1 to live with the Siegels. So what is this about? This is based on a documentary. And it's about this woman who, I believe from New York, upstate or something, who just has a dream. She wants to become rich. And she works really hard, but isn't able to make it happen. And then she gets married to a guy, and he's abusive to her. She leaves him. She's pregnant with their child, who is Victoria, who is the child that is in the show, her firstborn. And a friend of hers invites her to this fancy party because she wants her to meet this rich guy. This rich guy turns out to be David Siegel, who's a good 20, 30 years her senior. They hit it off and they get married, and she instantly attains her dream and becomes a billionaire or married to a billionaire. And she goes on her first trip away from the United States, and she goes to France, and she sees the Palace of Versailles, and she loves it so much. She's like, I wish we had this. And Dave's like, well, I'll build it for you. And so they come back to the US, and in Orlando, Florida, they start building the largest home in America. And she dubs herself the Queen of Versailles. And of course, this is early 2000s. And she has, apparently, I guess she had 6 more kids with David. And I don't want to give it too much away, but we know what happens in 2008. The stock market crashes, there's the housing bubble bursts. And so she does fall on hard times. And that basically takes us through the first act. And then the second act is them rebuilding after having lost all this money. So what's interesting about this show is it really deals with themes about wealth inequality, what it means to be rich. Are people happier when they're poor, or are they happier when they're rich? What are some of the problems that come with being rich? Is getting everything a good thing? Well, as you can guess, it's not really. So I think the themes are really interesting in this show. First of all, the issue, if I was a writer working on this show, I'd look at the problems. The problems is it's based on a documentary, and documentaries are not about plot. They're not about interesting narratives. They're about interesting characters. And with F. Murray Abram, Kristin Chenoweth, these two actors are character actors. So they bring characters to this. I'm never disappointed with Kristin Chenoweth, not disappointed in her in this. She's a star, and she's engaging. And when she's on stage, I am happy to listen to her and watch her and see what comic shtick she's going to come up with. And I got to say, vocally, she sounds great. She's a soprano, so that she can bring her chest voice up very high, and then she mixes it with her head voice a little bit. It sounds like belting to me, as far as I'm concerned. She's singing high and loud and belty. And we do get some nice soprano moments in the show as well. And it really interesting about the show is it keeps echoing back to like the 1700s, when Versailles was originally built by Sun King, King Louis. So we get that kind of music. So I found that interesting to juxtapose those two kinds of music. So that's what the play is about. Usually the story is boy gets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl. This is girl gets house, girl loses house, girl gets house, essentially, is this story, which I think is emotionally difficult to connect with. A rich woman wanting a house. Also, she basically is losing her daughter in the process. And so that's where the heart of the show is that she's wanted to give this baby that was born, that her abusive husband is the father for this child. He leaves the picture, but that she was sleeping in an apartment that she couldn't even afford a bed. She was sleeping on a sleeping bag in this tiny apartment with the baby in the crib. And she says she was happy then. And so it's about this woman who has this dream to become rich, but it's not really bringing her happiness. So I think the theme of the show is really fascinating. The difficulty of this, as I mentioned already, it's based on a documentary. The difficulty here is structurally, the whole first act really feels like a lot of exposition. The opening number feels like it's not really setting up the world so much as it's introducing all the characters to us. The name of that song, Because We Can. And, they're in the midst of building this dream house. And then we flash back to our lead character, Jackie, when she was 17 years old and living with her parents. All right, so that's what it's about. So was I bored? I'm going to say I was not bored because Kristin is on stage. And if Kristin's on stage, I cannot be bored. Was my heart palpitating for this narrative? No. The narrative, to me, the first act was a lot of just chronologically, we see her building the house, but then we flash back and it's chronologically going from 17 till she meets Dave until we get to the building of the house, basically. We just chronologically go through that. And normally when you write a show, the adage is take your character, put your character up in a tree, throw rocks at your character, get your character out of the tree. And this character was never in a tree for me. She was never in a situation where, until the end of the first act, when the bubble bursts and they lose all this money and her husband's like, we're going to have to put the Versailles up for sale. Then now she's up in a tree. So now I'm interested, but now I have to go drink my $20 glass of wine and then come back for Act Two. And Act Two starts out with a burst of energy because she's got chutzpah and she's having to sell off all these beautiful things, Fabergé eggs and all these the crazy things that she bought for this house to try to make enough money to try to save the house. And that's exciting. And this isn't really a spoiler alert because we know that the government bailed out the banks. And so really rich people basically got bailed out by the government. So she's up in a tree for a very short time and then she's out of the tree again and we're back with the house. And then the most dramatic thing that happens to the show is her daughter feels like she's not good enough for her mother. She's not pretty enough. But we don't get a lot of scenes. We get scenes of the daughter singing about how she doesn't feel loved or she doesn't feel like she's ever going to be good enough. But we don't get a lot of scenes between Jackie and her daughter. And when the show ends, they give Kristin a big song called This Time Next Year. And I think it's, supposed to be like Rose's turn. It's supposed to be her reckoning. And it's emotional and it's got big belty notes. But because we didn't have that relationship with the daughter, Gypsy, the whole show is about the relationship between Louise and Madame Rose. So my main criticism for this show is that it never got me by the heart. It never grabbed me. It was always separate. And I think the reason for this is the structure of the show, because it's based on a documentary. Plus, you've given me a character where she's likable because she's being played by Kristin Chenoweth. But what she's doing, spending all this money to create a house that she doesn't really need, I can't root for that. I can root for Madame Rose wanting her daughters to be stars because she's doing it for her children. But the question is, why is she keeps saying she's making this house for her family, but it's clearly not for her family. So I think they were trying to give us a Rose moment, but didn't really work for me. There's a lot going on in this show. There's a lot of characters, and I don't think it's really decided what it needs to be yet. And this also goes for the score as well. Love Steven Schwartz. But the score for this did not feel of a piece. It felt like a lot of different kinds of songs. And in fact, like the first song that Kristin sings has got a country feel to it, which I thought, great. It's Kristin, she's from Oklahoma, but we're in Florida. And I know that Florida is in the South, but I don't know, that one was light country. So I kind of went with it. But there was a big country song for David F. Murray Abrams' character called The Ballad of the Timeshare King. And it was country western. And it's set in Florida. And for me, I'm just like, country western Florida? It just doesn't feel right to me. I don't know. I'd rather hear Latin music if they're in Miami. Well, they're Orlando. So the score really bounces around. And sometimes it's for the young daughters, it's for the daughter and for the cousin, it's very more pop sounding. And then there's very musical theater, and then there's country, and there's country western. The score just kind of feels all over the place. And then we go to France, and we've got like the 1700s. Is that Baroque music? We've got harpsichord music. So not bored, but a little not really engaged as well, other than my love for Kristin kept me engaged. If it had been someone else, I probably would have gotten bored because I'm not really invested in these characters. Confused. Was I confused? There was just one spot where they get their money back because of the government bailout. And then they somehow went to Vegas, and something was going on in Vegas. And then this daughter has been left by herself. And it's a weird moment because we feel ominous that something bad is going to happen with the daughter. At least I felt, because she's climbing up these stairs and there's no ending to the stairs. I'm like, is she going to fall off the edge there? It's poetic. And so I was a little confused about what was happening in that scene. That was just a short moment. Otherwise, I followed the big jumps back to the 1700s. I always understood what we were doing. I don't know if I understood why we were doing it. I was confused by some of the song choices. Doing country western, which felt like a weird choice for Florida. So those were the confusions. The sound design was pretty good. This is in the St. James, which is like almost 2,000 seats. It's one of the largest Broadway houses. And this is a huge show, so it belongs in this theater. The sound design was a little echoey, and I felt like the orchestra was a little bit overpowering some of the vocalists. I missed a little bit of the vocals, although it was interesting. I do have to say, for the Tatum Grace Hopkins and Nina White, who play Victoria and Jonquil. No wonder I can't remember her name. Nina plays Victoria and Tatum plays Jonquil. For some reason, I understood them perfectly. They had more of a pop sound, but I understood them. Go figure. It's usually the opposite, right? Kristin's pretty easy to understand, but there were moments. Okay. Sound design, set design is amazing. Costume design is amazing. Should we say their names? Say their names. Costume, Christian Cowan had a lot of fun. Natasha Katz did the lighting design. Sound design, Peter Helensky. Hair and wigs, Cookie Jordan. Those were all great. Scenic design and video design, Dane Laffrey. Oh, do we want to talk about videos? So videos, because this is based on a documentary and the camera crews are like shooting her, and they've bought this huge TV screen for their Versailles home, they occasionally show things on the video screen. Normally, I don't love this, but because I was way up in the balcony, I kind of appreciated the moments where we had just a moment where I could see the character's face really big just for a minute to kind of ground me and be like, oh yeah, that's the actor I thought it was. I was okay with the video usage. They didn't sit on it for too long. We didn't do a whole song with the video on. It was just little moments. And like when she was on QVC or she was doing a commercial for coffee. So actually the video design didn't bother me. So wrapping this up, and then I'll look at these comments. Not bored, but not fully invested. A little confused about some of the song choices and some of the narrative arc, but not confused with actually what was going on. So to wrap it all up, I think this show feels like it's still being developed. And adapting a documentary, that's tough. It's really a tough assignment. I don't know of many other, the one about the kids with autism, it also had struggled from that. This show also reminded me of Tammy Faye in many regards, in that we've got characters that they're telling us we're supposed to like, but we're not sure if we like them. And then they become rich and then they lose everything. And we're like, do we feel bad for them? I don't know. It had a lot in common with that. And in fact, I always thought that Kristin Chenoweth actually would have made a really good Tammy Faye. All right. So tickets, I was press rep for this show, kept me dangling. They were like, we might be able to give you a press ticket. And I just finally gave up. And a couple days ago, I bought a ticket on Today Tix. I think it was $55. I prefer the balcony in the St. James Theater to the rear mezzanine, because the rear mezzanine is just so far back and it just feels claustrophobic. And so I got a ticket all the way over on the side on the aisle so that I could look down the aisle and I wouldn't have to worry about any heads. The rake of the balcony is great in the St. James. So yes, I wish I was closer just to see more of Kristin, but I find the balcony seats in the St. James to not be so bad. So for $50, wasn't bad. Yeah, and I got the cheapest seat. And I think I got the side because it's only like 3 rows back. And that seat was great on the aisle. Fantastic. So go support Kristin and all these hardworking actors. I mean, if Kristin is in something, I'm going to go see it. So if you love Kristin Chenoweth, go for it for her, because she's great in this. And there is a lot to like about this show. I just compared it to Tammy Faye. The craft of this show is so much better than Tammy Faye. When I saw Tammy Faye, it felt like Elton John phoned in the score. This one, I actually feel that Stephen Schwartz is there. I'm happy to hear a new Stephen Schwartz score. And yeah, and go see it for the fancy costumes and the light. There's not a lot of dancing in this show. I would like more dancing. I like dancing. All right. So thank you for watching this live review. I'm going to now answer some questions or read these comments, see if there are any questions. Let's see what the peoples have to say. All right. I want to stay inside the play. Keep me engaged, keep me amused with what's in front of me. 'Cause I don't want